To the cloud. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is Phoenix Norman from Beast, the community specifically for executive assistants at the top of the game, and where they learn everything else that people don't tell you to your face about getting to the top of the game. I am blown away and super stoked to actually present my friend. I like to call him my friend. Someone I used to work with very shortly, but someone that I admire tremendously, Matt Palmer. Who works at Replit and is going to actually walk us through Replit Agent. Now, most of you know I've been on LinkedIn just going off about, oh my God, you got to try agents. It's like the next thing. It's the big thing. It's going to automate your life and all those things. And I sort of bullied Matt into coming on and showing us how to do this just because he's so damn good at it. This is what he does at Replit. And Matt, I'll allow you, of course, to sort of tell us what you do and kind of how on earth how are things going in the land of Replit Agent?
Well, thanks, Phoenix. I really appreciate it. Yeah, as Phoenix said, I'm Matt. Hopefully, I can live up to that introduction. Quite the play up there. So I'm gonna do my best. But yeah, no, I work in developer relations at Replit, and practically that means I do quite a lot of things. So everything from giving demos to like I'll be doing today to explaining what Replit is, how it works, to hosting events and doing things in the Bay Area, which is where I live. So yeah, I'm excited to show you guys a bit about Replit Agent and hopefully explain how really anybody can be empowered to build what we're calling personal software and, automate the hard parts of their job, automate the things they don't want to do, but also, deliver great experiences and take things to the next level, which I think pretty much anybody can do at this point.
Which is amazing. I've been, of course, trolling all the YouTubes and looking at all the people that are, really, really jumping on the Replit Agent bandwagon, and it's across, every influencer these days. I mean, it literally is becoming that thing that I love about Replit. First of all, it's just like it feels like the third or fourth time we've gone through being like the kids, right?
Yeah.
And this is just so powerful as I think of it as a medium, but it's so powerful as a tool for anyone that really wants to automate and really sort of, create in various different capacities. Anything that comes to mind. That's what's so cool about it. It's not just one thing and you have to sort of follow down a certain path. No matter what your mind, sort of opens up to and anything it sort of thinks of, you could literally create an agent around it. So I'm gonna stop talking. Let's dive into what is it like to actually create an agent.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, no, I can share my screen and I can talk a bit about what Replit is, and then we can talk about what the agent is as well. I'm going to send a request to Phoenix to share my screen real quick.
Of course. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Everybody knows how Zoom goes.
It's always. And then I'm going to share. So, Phoenix, you should be able to see Replit there. Got the thumbs up. Cool. So this is the Replit homepage, and there's a lot going on here. But at its core, let's take a step back. We'll talk about what Replit is. So Replit is an online sort of workspace for creating and editing code. It is code first, but the Replit agent is an iteration of Replit that basically allows you to create everything about personal software, everything about development in natural language. So we're going to be giving the agent natural language inputs, and it's going to be configuring our development environment for us. Now, if you're, not familiar with coding, or if you haven't spent a lot of time, if you're not a professional software developer, this might look a bit foreign, but I want to emphasize here, the key thing that you really need is just curiosity. And if you're curious and you like to learn, and you're, sort of patient, I think you'll be really impressed at what you can do. And so I'm going to go through this experience. We're going to build something using only natural language, and then talk a bit about, what that means and how this can enable you to like create those things that you've always wanted to make or had really great ideas, but maybe haven't had the time to sit down and learn. So, the way to interact with the agent right here is just by typing in this chat box. You can also like attach photos or talk to the agent to create something. So that's something I can do here. We can actually talk to the agent. Let's see if this works. I'll allow access to my microphone. This actually could be a little finicky on the call here, but yeah, actually, I think Zoom is Shouldn't try
Of
just like random
course,
stuff.
you know
Yeah.
how that
So
works, but
we'll
I'm literally salivating at the fact that there's a microphone there. So
Yeah. So in the future, you can talk to the agent, but here I'll just type in text. And something that I think the agent's really great for is like collaborative experiences. Something that's unique to Replit and unique to the agent is that it can build entire databases and environments so that you can create more complex applications versus things maybe if you're familiar with other tools like Claude or some of the other AI tools out there. So one of my favorite applications that I've been enjoying lately has been a collaborative sort of trip planning app. And this is maybe if you have a big team and you can imagine wanting people to vote on the choices of things that you're doing when you're planning a trip. So let's tell the agent create an application uh, that allows users to input and vote, kind of like Reddit style, um, in some sense, STYLE. So like upvotes and downvotes on locations for an upcoming trip. And like Phoenix has told me a bit about his audiences. If y'all are planning trips for people, this might be something that you've struggled with. Maybe you've been sending out surveys, or it's been really hard to collect or aggregate data. But this sort of application would make it very apparent and allow you to, get the opinions of not only the people inside your company, but those maybe even outside your company if you just share a link. Because one of the great things about Replit is that you're going to be able to take this application and deploy it so that it's live on the internet. So you have your own website or web page. And that's another really great use case we've seen with the Replit agent. But I'm just going to walk through what's happening here. The first thing when I send these instructions in, that the agent is going to come up with a plan. And this is very different than some other approaches. But it actually tells us here, okay, well, it's going to use Flask and JavaScript. Again, if you're not technical, you don't need to worry about that too much. But the initial prototype for this app is going to include the ability to add locations, upvote, downvote, and display sorted results. And then the agent has, some suggestions for additional features. So we could add user authentication. We could add the ability to create multiple trip plans or a comment system for each locations, or even like tags. Now, I don't really want those things. We can add additional details later, but I'm just going to click approve and start. And so now what you're seeing is actually Replit. We haven't talked a bit too much about what Replit is, but it's actually a collaborative development environment that's running entirely in my browser. So this is like coding, but just in your browser. And the agent has control over that entire environment. So what you're seeing it do now is edit the files and create a virtual environment in some sense with all of the code that we're going to need for application. And it's doing more than that. It's creating databases. It's installing right here packages. So you don't have to worry about any of like the hard parts of building or working with code. You're just going to get this entire environment sort of nice and packaged up once the agent is done with it. And
I
what that
really
means
hope,
is,
sorry, I
sorry,
don't
go
want
ahead.
to interject. I really hope people understand how mind-blowing this is and how, how essentially how quickly this now happens, as opposed to having to write literally every single line of code in order to exact, what we're after. That's we've gone from, what, days or hours, many, many hours, down to, minutes, right? So it's insane to me how quickly this happens now.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point because what that means is that, if you get around all that hard stuff, you can focus on just like making this better and learning and understanding what's going on. And maybe you don't know about all these individual files or what's happening here, but what it means is that you can learn really quickly by prompting the agent by talking with it. So the agent actually has something trip location voting for us here, and it's asking us if we're able to see the list of locations and the form to add a new location. So we're going to say yes, and just let it know, and then it'll think and continue iterating. Yeah, and so, as I was kind of emphasizing, this is its own environment, and while the agent is working on these things, you can dig in and see the code that it's writing. So maybe you have some familiarity with like scripting or like trying to build your own automations. You can look here and learn, how the agent is configuring this application, all the code that it's writing, and the things that it's doing, and maybe even take that into some of your own, future development experiences. So it looks like the agent is just reviewing the implementation, um, and adding in some like final tweaks. It's very communicative, which I appreciate.
Uh, It's pretty cool actually. And I was laughing because we have several EAs. I put them through 100 days of code. So it's so nice to sort of see this. And I'm a big nerd, so of course I'm looking at like, oh, that's what that meant, from my 100 days and trying to some things that I sort of ran into that were, a bit of a bug, at least in my head. So it's nice to actually kind of go through and actually review the code as it's being built, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the valuable things here is that you can think about these AI tools as an opportunity to learn. I think a lot of people think about them as a replacement for coding ability, but in some sense, it's actually just like any other technology, sort of a pair programmer or a way to facilitate learning more. And you can get to something that works really fast. I remember when I learned to code, like without I feel like a dinosaur now, but it was really hard and it took me a really long time. It took me a really long time to get something that worked. And then even from that point to, figure out how to, kind of upskill or learn new things. But here you already have something that works. And so you can kind of reverse engineer. You can ask additional questions to AI, right? Like separate from the agent, we also have AI in the workspace. And so this is just like chatting with Claude Sonnet, right? You can chat with AI to ask more questions about how things work. But I won't delay this any further. It looks like it's asking us if we can actually use this trip location voting. So let's say, we're going on a trip. Phoenix, what's a good activity for a trip?
I'd say good question. Wine tasting.
Okay, wine tasting. There's our first location. So let's see if we can add. Okay, so we have wine tasting, and then maybe there's like a hiking that you want to do. And I don't know what else. Maybe going to the beach or something. I don't
Yeah, yeah,
know
yeah.
where I'm going that I can wine taste, hike,
I
and go to the.
you
Only in
never know.
California, right?
Maybe Santa Barbara. You never know.
Santa Barbara is a pretty great spot. Okay, so we have our application here. We're getting some very nice visuals. This design actually, so this sort of purple bar, some of this is pre-release and it'll be out soon, so your experience might look a little different, but the functionality is exactly the same. And so then if we're, going in and we're voting, we get a little toast there. Let's see if this sorts. It does dynamically sort. So as we vote on things, it's going to move them up or down, and then we can delete those as well. And so, this is the agent in a nutshell. We didn't really, write any code. Actually, we wrote no code. It was just entirely prompting the agent. And I can confirm here, yes, everything works. And we have this beautiful application. And what I want to emphasize is that if you build other tools like this with AI, maybe they'll work, but persisting data is a harder problem than you might imagine, right? And when I say persisting data, I just mean having these votes not change or these locations stay the same across users, because typically those require like a data store, a database, or some way to store that data. And that's kind of the hard part. Now, the great thing about Replit is that we created a database. And, if you have any familiarity with databases, we can go in here to our database tab and we can see we have a locations table that's going to store our different locations and the number of votes. And so that means that, if multiple people are looking at this at the same time and voting, you don't have to worry about losing that progress. And so,
That's,
yeah,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
I want to double click on that because again, the fact that you have the data available, because it's one thing, obviously, the prettiness of this, obviously with the UI and all of that. But, a lot of times, in certain roles, especially like chiefs of staff, for instance, everything is based on data. So, it's nice to be able to go somewhere, be able to pull that and also show that and maybe, pull the literally hard data and create a chart or something, you know what I mean? Or like a pie chart or a bar graph or whatever else. So I'm glad you showed that because it's funny, that actually escaped me as well, but it's such an important part, especially for executive assistants to be able to actually pull and extrapolate and kind of massage that data however they need to.
For sure. And, this wouldn't be much if I just had it here sort of locally, right? The whole point of this is to share it with people. And so we'll walk through what it looks like to deploy on Replit as well. And so we have 4 different types of deployments. Right now, we don't do a super great job of explaining to these for, folks that are maybe less technical. But essentially for apps like these user-facing apps, we'd either want to use a reserved VM or an autoscale deployment. Autoscale deployments the analogy I like to use like this is maybe this is terrible or and corny, but auto scaling deployments are kind of like a Nest thermostat in the sense that, if you're not using it, it'll turn off. Or if you're using it a lot, if you're home and you need the temperature to be lower, they can kind of ramp up to meet demand. So if you have like thousands of people using your apps, the deployment will kick into gear and will spin up additional machines on the back end to sort of handle that influx of traffic. If nobody's using your app, it'll spin down and you actually won't be billed, for the usage. Reserve VMs are kind of like a greenhouse in some sense. Like that you need a constant temperature because you don't want your plants to die, right? So it's an always on server, which means that you're going to be billed the same amount every month for having this thing run and deploy. So there's cost certainty, but it also means that if you get like a million people using your application or like lots of people using your application, you might experience performance degradation because it's not going to scale up or down. So that's kind of like my spiel for those two things. Static deployments, kind of like static websites. So if you're building a website, static deployment, and then scheduled, it's kind of like a script if you want it to run every day at midnight. But we'll just go with an auto scale deployment here. We'll set it up. And so then you can configure if you're, really into this sort of thing and want to research this a bit, you can configure the number of machines that you're deploying and, sort of the power of each machine. If you're not worried about it too much, that's fine. You can just approve it. And then, you can give your deployment a name. So we'll call it trip voting. And this is going to deploy directly to tripvoting.replit.app. Now, we have a Teams offering. So if you have maybe a small business or, you're a part of a larger team, Replit Teams might be for you. And what that gets you are things like private deployments where you can limit access of these deployments to team members. So just wanted to call that out here. But if you just want to deploy your app for everybody, we can just go ahead and click deploy. And this is going to take maybe a few minutes. But yeah, once this is done, we're going to have it live at a URL, and everybody will be able to access it. And maybe I'll even leave it up so Phoenix and all you
So
viewers
we can
can,
go wine
use it after. Yeah,
tasting, hiking,
exactly.
and into the beach.
Well, you can vote. You can tell us what you want to do. So,
I love that.
but yeah, I don't know, Phoenix. Do you have any other questions about like, or maybe things your viewers want to know about Replit?
I think one of the things, and I'm glad you mentioned this, for instance, I'm all about automating the role as much as possible. And I've been teaching that for God knows how many years, and especially as an executive assistant for almost 30 when I was one. And, one of the things I guess that I love, especially in this demo, is that with the type of deployment, because in a lot of cases, it's sort of, feast or famine. So in other words, it's a feast when we got to get something done, we got to get, people to vote and sort of iterate on whatever that is, et cetera. But then that's probably going to languish depending upon what it is or what type of agent that we've created. That's going to languish once the event actually happens, right? So I guess it was nice to sort of see that, if it's not going to charge if there's really no demand, right? But the question I have for you is, for instance, if I created an agent before and I want to iterate on that agent, am I still able to iterate on the agent and basically keep it within the same type of deployment or even move it to a different type of deployment, for instance, because it's now app worthy, meaning as opposed to just being like a simple survey, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is going great. You know what I mean? I'm going to make some.
Yeah.
And then how would you sort of split that out, for instance? Because and I'm sorry to go on a tangent here, part of what I try to teach in Beast is people learning how to build businesses of their own. And, some of those ideas come from the work that we do, creating an efficiency or something like that. So it would be kind of interesting to sort of see, well, hey, I created this little thing that was really just supposed to be something for work, but this is viable as a standalone product and I should be able to make money from it since I created it. And so just curious what that journey would look like as far as like almost decoupling, if you will, from how it is. Or if it's not a decouple, it's just a simple move.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is your production here. You can go on as many tangents as you want, but I'll talk about all those things. So I think the important thing to emphasize is that on Replit, what we created with the Replit agent is its own environment. And the cool thing about that is that you can make copies of it like instantly and you can edit it. You can do whatever you want with it. If you really want to move off of Replit, you can download the code as a zip and do whatever you want to, right? So I guess to answer the first question, and this is going to be done deploying soon, so then we can actually use the app, which is fun. But the deployment process won't be interrupted if we navigate away because this is running in the cloud. If I go to the homepage, you can see, okay, now I have this trip vote REPL, and it's actually deploying right now, and we can see the status there. If I wanted to, I could click fork. And what that does is it makes an exact copy of the entire environment. So like, let's call this trip vote 2, just for our own purposes, right? And I'll click fork. And now I have exactly what I just created before, but this is a completely separate environment. It has all the same code. It has all of the same characteristics and everything. And if I click run, it's going to look exactly the same. And the reason is because we just copied the exact same environment. And I want to make that very clear, right? So from the sense of like maybe reusing things or like creating things that scale, say you wanted to have multiple live surveys. You could create the same application or you could spin up multiple applications for multiple clients. And then I could deploy this and send it to another company or another, sort of end user that I was serving. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if maybe you're scaling your business and you want other people to be able to, edit this application. We have real-time multiplayer. So like, you guys probably are familiar with Google Docs, editing things simultaneously. You can do that with Replit. And so if I copy this and I send it to someone, you're going to be able to see in real time them editing the code. You'd see their cursor moving around. I won't do that here because it gets a bit hairy with doing demos with multiple browsers and things like that. But that's another way that you're sort of scaling, scaling your business. And so maybe like Phoenix mentioned, you have this thing and a lot of people love it. And, you really want to turn it into a product. Well, maybe you hire some contractors, you hire some other folks to work on this while you're, doing what you do day to day. You could invite them to Replit, come in, they could edit the code. You could see exactly what they're doing and kind of be able to manage in some sense without really needing to worry too much about all the other technical, right? Maybe if they're software engineers, they're writing on Git or they're using GitHub or doing all this crazy stuff. Well, you might be able to keep things a bit more centralized in that regard. Now I'm going to actually go back because our deployment's done. So I'll show you what the deployment looks like, and then I'll kind of continue from the scaling perspective. But if I click this link, I have exactly what we just saw. The difference here is that this is live on the web at that location, tripvoting.replit.app. So, kind of end to end, no code. We're just prompting the agent, but the important thing is that I do have code that I can take with me. And so when we think about scaling, when we think about turning this into maybe something that you're selling to people, there are quite a few more components that you need to add, right? So like you might want user authentication. I have tutorials and videos on how to do that. You might want like pricing or webhooks to like Stripe to charge people for a service. These are complicated things. And so at some point currently, you might need to start hiring engineers to help you build them out. Or you might need to start learning to code so that you can build some of those things yourself, or sort of prompting the agent, pushing its capabilities a little bit to see how far it can get with helping you implement those things. But that ties into sort of like this idea of personal software and where AI is headed. And so currently, there's a limitation on that. You can't have AI, or I don't know where you could go without knowing how to code that where AI can basically build a fully functioning product for you that can charge people, authenticate users, etc. I think you still need to know how to use code to some extent, but I do think we are in the middle of a revolution where in the next year, in the next 2 years, you will be able to create an entire piece of software, an entire application, that you can sell to people, that you can charge people for, and that is extremely productionalized in some sense. And let me just separate when I say like productionalized, you can create something currently we just did that shows value and that you use for your business, and that is an amazing tool for you to go out and be more productive and efficient. But I think the next step is like being able to sell something or build something that scales to like millions of people. Currently, I think you can use this as like an MVP or get to the point where it's useful for your business. But then if you want to turn it into a product, you might need to hire someone.
Right. And I think, that brings up a kind of a point, and it's something that I've been writing a lot on LinkedIn about is, and this is a bit of a digression, I guess, but not really. Given the amount of sort of, layoffs and things that are happening right now, I keep telling people, please team up. I mean, especially if for instance, if you're an EA or if you're just, someone that has a cool idea, and able to sort of maybe create, just a very simple agent If it's something that you feel is a viable product, there are plenty of other of engineers out there that are also out of work. You know what I mean? This is a great opportunity, and I'm glad you showed multiplayer because, for instance, if you sort of created the MVP, you have a friend that's also out of work, but who also is really, geeking out over the idea that you have. It's easy to sort of invite them in. They can actually, sort of write code or sort of look through the code and sort of make it pretty or whatever else, and keep iterating together. And the next thing you know, you have a product and it's something that you can sell that is actually being hosted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm all about entrepreneurship these days, especially in this environment, which is really precarious. And again, Replit yet again has created a way for people to sort of actually create something viable and actually offer it to the market. And, this is only the beginning days. I mean, I'm already seeing the iterations that you guys are doing in the UI and everything else. And it's just incredible to me how quickly you're iterating. And, so I'm curious, at least from your viewpoint, and you kind of, mentioned it, what's really next? Like where should we be kind of pointing our eyeballs, if you will, I'd say over the next year?
Yeah, I definitely did allude to this a bit, but I have a few more thoughts on that. And I think as a general rule, I would just um, assume that everything is going to continue to get better. Assume that the models are going to continue to get better. So like LLMs, like the things that power ChatGPT or Claude, et cetera. Assume those are going to continue to advance. And that means all the products that are built on top of those LLMs are going to continue to get better too. And so like Replit, which can help you build and deploy software, is probably going to get, this is probably the worst it's ever going to be. As a matter of fact, just like a couple of weeks ago, this app would have looked very different and it might not have worked on the first try. Right. And so it's already improved. We've already made it 2 to 4 times faster to spin up these applications. We've already reduced the number of errors users are seeing by like 4 to 6 fold, right? Don't quote me on those numbers. They're off the top of my head. But I just want to emphasize, like, again, I think things are accelerating, as a matter of fact. And this type of personal software is only going to get easier to create. And the analogy I've been using with some folks is kind of like, before the iPhone, really, it was really hard to take good pictures. You didn't have a ton of folks that were, hobbyist photographers. You probably needed a really expensive camera, and that was mostly constrained to professional photographers. Now with smartphones, with the iPhone, you can take amazing quality photos anytime. If you're at an event, if you're out with your friends, and some people actually become professionals that way, or they're able to sell their photos, or they build a following, right? You can record yourself. You can do some really cool stuff. I see the same change with software. A couple years ago, you needed to know how to code. You needed to know how to set up a development environment, and you needed to know how to deploy those applications to the cloud in a scalable way. And that was reserved for people who did it professionally. And today, I'm here doing this in front of you. You could have did anybody watching this video could have did the exact same thing that I just did, and that barrier is only being lowered. So the analogy I like to draw is we're in an era of personal software that's similar to what the iPhone was for photography. And I would say if you take that with what I said earlier, and that is that these things are only going to get better, and tools like Replit are only going to get simpler. Maybe in a couple of years, right, you are building and deploying your own business. You're building your own software without necessarily knowing the building blocks of code. Or maybe you do that and then you learn how to write some code and you take things to another level. In the same vein, right, since there are still professional photographers who do quite well, there will always be professional software developers, and they will always have a place as well. I just kind of have to mention that. But yeah, the direction Phoenix, I think I see this heading is that anybody's going to be able to take those ideas in their head, to leverage their creativity to manifest digital tools, whether they sell them or they just use them to make their lives better, or they just make really cool stuff that makes other people's lives better. Yeah, I'm excited for the future.
I absolutely love that. And truthfully, let's end on that. That's like such a great sentiment that I'm just like, I don't want to ruin it with saying something stupid. So, Matt, seriously, thank you so much for taking the time to sort of walk us through this and show us how easy it is, and also give us, a little bit of what the future looks like. I mean, I'm again astounded at how quickly all of this is iterating, and especially on Replit. And I miss Replit. Obviously, I haven't worked there, but I'm such a fan and now using it on a daily basis, and it's nice to be on the other side of it. It's instead of just being an employee, but actually someone that's leveraging it as often as possible. So. Thank you again. Is there also give a shout out to what you're doing. You have an amazing blog that I think everyone needs to sign up for. So give us a little bit of all the extra stuff that we should be looking for from Matt Palmer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phoenix. Yeah, and what I'll also do is I'll turn this into a template. So basically, if you just want to use this exact same thing, you sign up for Replit, you can use this and deploy it and use it in your own business. You don't even have to ask the agent or do any of the stuff I did. So first thing is I'll make that available. Second thing is, yeah, I work in developer relations at Replit. If you like the content that I'm putting out, I'm always trying to make it easier for folks to get started building, whether that's people who have never coded before or people who have some experience coding and just want to take things to the next level. You can find me on Twitter or X, as they call it now, as the cool kids call it. I think I'm at Matt P. Pal, so MattPPAL. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Matt Palmer. I look like this, so just look for the profile picture. And I do have a blog, as Phoenix mentioned, on my personal website. We'll give you the link to that as well. I just write about like random like life stuff, some
It's so good.
observations, I suppose. I really appreciate it. Well,
You're a
thank
deep
you.
thinker. I love that. Deep thinkers rule.
And I'm always trying to share videos and tutorials on the Replit YouTube as well. But I think those are the main places to reach me. And otherwise, yeah, this was my pleasure. I always love helping people build.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks so much, Matt. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Beast. And go out there and be great.